guys, super excited to revisit Rick Brown and his room. This is one of my favorites I've visited in the past few years, and for longtime subscribers will recognize immediately the Tidal Akiras. Beautiful. And a lot of people have become more in tune with Tidal, with their show being in more shows, especially Munich, and they have that Bugatti one that got a lot of attention.
Bugatti got a lot of attention, being the boutique product.
Exactly. But I mean, the Sunrays and the Akiras that I've heard even before that, these are as high end gets. Not just aesthetically, but sound quality as well. And these have been your reference for a long time.
Yeah, since 2017, when Yuri, the actual designer of the loudspeaker, came here and spent 3 days setting them up with me. So yeah, I've been here ever since, and they're in permanent residence. I don't anticipate making any change because they've accommodated me even as I've gone to a 20 watt per channel single-ended amp. They run perfectly with them, even though they're 88 sensitivity. They just work perfectly with these amps, as you'll find out a little bit later. And it has a lot to do with the drive capability of the amp and a lot to do with its ability to drive a difficult load, even though it is an output transformerless tube amp. So let's start with just telling you what's different since the last time you were here, Jason.
Yeah, and let me just refresh people's memory. If you don't know Rick Brown, you probably should. He's one of the most knowledgeable guys I've found in the industry. People like him and Steve McCormick are the kind of guys I learn a lot from. And I mean, not that I know everything, but it's rare for me to find people that have that insight and relationships. So he's a distributor as well, basically a home-based distributor.
Exactly.
So this is not just, he's an audiophile, definitely hardcore, but he also runs a business with very bespoke, one-of-a-kind type products. Even when you do Berning stuff, it's one-of-a-kind. So giving you that little bit of preface if you didn't see before. But yeah, let's go ahead and walk through your stuff again.
Well, I think that's a good way to begin. And I want to explain that I'm actually the manufacturer of the Berning amplifiers because it's co-branded with HiFi One, which is my brand. And so I've literally gone to people like Steve McCormick, like David Berning, and like the people at Ypsilon. In this case, I mean, talking about Demetrius, who's the owner of the company and lead designer, to bring their talents together to make something unique. And so what we've done with these amplifiers, they literally, and if you come over, Jason, I just would point something out to you that really makes the point. These are 55-pound chokes, external chokes to a 4-box amp. But notice the only thing on them is Ypsilon.
Right.
Okay, so this is a unique collaboration. It's a technical collaboration. It really validates what we bring to the party, knowing that nobody makes a bespoke inductor or a choke, they're the same thing, like Ypsilon does. Absolutely the best in business. So those are pure silver. The amplifiers are a collaboration with Steve McCormick and David Berning. So it's David Berning's Zodal design, which allows us to do something very unique. And that is the SET conundrum has been solved. Your typical single-ended triode amp, and this uses an 845 or a 211 tube, they have tremendous linearity in the middle. But by design, they never have great top end, they never have great bass, and you have to put up with that if you in fact want to get that mid-range. We've solved that by using radio frequency as a carrier and by having these be switch mode power supply. So it is a unique amp. There's been a lot written about that by Nelson Pass. There's also a lot written by Robert Harley if anyone wants to find out more about the SET conundrum that we have solved. You did talk about the speakers, and of course nothing's changed there. They're our continual reference. And if we move on, I'll show you what's different since the last time we were here.
I just want to get a close-up of this finish because this is, again, for me, you don't ever want to overlook the finish. I know I've caught some flack on my channel for being obsessive about finish, but this is stuff that's in your home. And when you're paying these prices that you pay for these speakers, you want this kind of piece of art, because that's part of the price to go with the performance, and Tidal is one that gives you both without any worries.
I have to add that I totally agree, and in all the loudspeakers I've ever had in this room, the Tidals have the best finish, absolutely by far. So I don't think that there's anybody out there making loudspeakers that does a better job of finish than Yuri does at Tidal. That's why there's no even dust on them.
Yeah.
I kind of love them, if you get the idea.
And just to put a bow on this, we saw this in Costa Mesa.
Yes.
The MC Audio Tech room had these driving them, and I featured them last year here. But again, don't overlook the fact that this is a collaboration between Ypsilon, David Berning, and Steve McCormick. three guys that don't have to collaborate.
That's right.
And rarely do.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
so when you put that kind of brain power, experience, knowledge, and expertise together, kudos to you for becoming the manufacturer
Right.
of that kind of collaboration. Just being able to put that together is something that never been accomplished before.
No.
So hats off to you to be able to accomplish that, and the results speak for themselves. I think what Robert Harley, the previous iteration, Robert
Yes,
Harley,
the previous amplifiers, which are the 60-watt push-pull amps, Robert Harley did a review on them, and then he did something I don't think he's ever done before or since. He wrote a second review about the exact same amp. There was no change to say a year later, as much as I loved it the first time, after a year, I love it even more.
So that speaks volumes.
Yourself, yeah.
I don't want people to overlook that. But yeah, let's go ahead and see what else we got.
This is where we do all the voicing. That's where all the tubes are chosen for each one of the different loudspeakers it'll go with. So if someone has a loudspeaker that's high efficiency because they're really, really low in noise, we have tubes for that in terms of input tubes. And then we have people that have speakers like mine. There's different ones. So we do tailor them to each individual.
Yeah, that's another thing we're going to check out is his tube collection is impeccable.
Thank you. You can see that, there's more of them waiting in line. There's more chokes. So they're burned in for a week. I listen to all of them. We go through infant mortality. If they make the cut, then they get boxed and they're on their way to
And these are not cheap. I mean, just the power supplies alone, the inductors from Ypsilon, pure silver, and just precious metal we're talking about.
45 pounds, yeah.
45 pounds of precious metal, almost all. This is going to be well over, what,
They're $215,000.
$215,000 a pair.
And they can always go to the website and see the installations that they're already in. There's a number of installations where these SCTs are in play.
Yeah, and
there's
more in process. So yeah, it's not just a bespoke, one-of-a-kind, one-off.
Not at all.
They're actually selling. But this is another thing I want to feature is your turntable.
Absolutely.
Many people don't know about the Dohmann and the -K built into it.
Yes.
My friend Doug he bought it from you,
Yes, he did.
the Dohmann, and JR is going to go help him set it up. I'm going to film this. This is something that we don't want people to overlook because a lot of money spent on turntables now for a lot of fluff, but this is
the real deal.
This is the real deal. Everything here is for a reason. It's cool looking for sure, but it's not done for aesthetic purposes.
No, there's nothing gratuitous about this table. I mean, there's a lot of turntables. You look at them, and you have to ask yourself, did form follow function? Not really. I think sometimes it's really a matter of marketing. That's not the case here. So, as you pointed out, this does have a -K platform in it, and for those who don't know what that is, they were designed to put electron microscopes on top of. And in that situation, you literally would have an electron microscope would be sitting on a separate concrete pad. It wouldn't be on the same pad that the rest of the building's in. And then to make sure that the kind of disturbances like a truck driving outside would cause to an electron microscope, that's what a -K platform will prevent. So if you can zoom in here, perhaps you can, and maybe I can even light it up for you with this to show you.
Let's put on my flash here too.
The genius of Mark Dohmann is that he's built in the plinth a -K platform, as you see. So that is designed to float once we have the Dohmann clamp. Now you can see that it actually is floating.
Yeah, and they're not hiding anything.
No.
And this is for electron microscopes. So isolation, you can talk about a lot of different isolation products, but this is what's used in electron microscopes.
Absolutely.
You probably would be hard pressed to find anything better.
I think that's a true statement. Now, also since you've been here, Mark has made another improvement. This clamp is, as you can read on here, you can't read it, but I'll read it for you. The resonance suppression architecture. Maybe you can.
Okay.
But this is a brand new product, and it's more than a clamp. What it also does is that it takes vibrations and literally they stay inside the clamp that comes through the spindle and comes across. So this literally has lowered the noise floor and allowed this to be a lower distortion player.
Interesting.
To go along with that, we've also had, I think when you were here last, we had the Reed.
Yes, this is a very complex arm.
It is. It's a little bit, it looks a little Rube Goldberg, I'll admit to that.
Yeah.
But what it does, because of all of this, is allows you to have a tangentially tracking pivoted tone arm, which we can demonstrate. So you can watch that the needle is moving in a tangential way. So it literally is going across the same way you would cut a lacquer, but you're doing so pivoted.
Yeah,
So
so
it does
it's the
take
best
some-
of both worlds.
Yeah.
People want to choose one versus linear tracking versus.
Right. And I'll show you something else too. When we talked about, you mentioned JR, and when it comes down to analog, most of the time, what's wrong with people's analog systems is they just are not set up well. So I'm going to turn this light off to demonstrate something to you. Can you see, Jason? Let me get this off.
The readings.
Yeah, see if I can get that off so you can see the readings. We got too much light in here. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so you can see that when we're talking about level, this is level because this is one of those great devices the cartridge man makes in England. But as you can see,
Perfectly level.
It's perfectly level. All right, so despite this, it's perfectly vertical. So that's part of it. JR does all of my setups. So that's one of the biggest issues is that people spend the money to buy these turntables, this being a Dohmann Helix Mark II. There is another iteration of this table that's just come out. There's a lot of reviews about both this one and its sister table. But I'm going to have this replaced with a Mark III because Mark and the owner of the company is coming out. And they're going to bring a new one. And we're going to be ready to show that and do an upgrade around the country. So that's something else that's new since you've been here.
Cool.
The other thing that's really new since you got here, and I'm really excited about, because this is a collaborative effort with myself and Steve McCormick of SMC.
Who's on my channel quite a bit.
Yes, your readers know him. So let's let them see that. And what it comes down to is that Steve has really had no opportunity until this time to make something that is 100% as good as he could make cost no object. Because we didn't have the parts. It's not because he couldn't do it, but we didn't have all the parts.
Right.
We do have all the parts now, which also includes, and I think if you come to the, well, you probably can't see it too easily, but the point I was going to make is that this is an area where Steve has done some research that I think is really cutting edge. He's using a circuit breaker in the back instead of an on-off switch.
Okay.
And what that's done for him is he no longer has to buy very expensive fuses. Now, without naming the company, we were buying $200 fuses to go on these, okay?
Yeah.
No more fuses and a better sound by using this by not having a fuse. He's also included things like tank wood. Tank wood goes around the fuse box. Tank wood is used in other places because
they call it Panzerholz too.
Panzerholz, the same thing.
Yeah.
Panzerholz goes all the way back to Germany when they use it for tank floors. Boeing put it in the airplane on floors, so it's been used in the plinths of loudspeakers, blah, 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 right?
Right.
So when we get down to what's made this unique is, A, it's a cost no object design. It's allowed Steve to make his ultimate preamplifier, and here's how it works. This is essentially an ultimate passive device that has an outboard power supply connected by an incline, specially made umbilical for it, that allows it to drive very long runs of even high capacitance cable because it has tremendously low output impedance but has a lot of voltage swing. That's what you need to be able to drive difficult amplifiers with long cables, particularly ones that have like 10K input impedance. But the beauty of it is it's the ultimate passive along the same lines. And that's what Steve has really done. He's made himself a world-class passive with real tolerance to drive.
To be able to drive the cables, which is
Exactly.
always the trade-off. And people don't even understand that. We were talking about that
Yes, we
earlier.
were. Yes, we
I'm going to have to do a video about that because you see such primitive advice with people with cables and even gear, but they never understand why certain cables might work better or not work at all.
That's right.
And this is a perfect example of having somebody that can put an entire system together is invaluable if you don't have this knowledge, because again, fancy chassis are great, and I don't begrudge anybody spending money on fancy chassis, but it's much more important what's underneath the hood. That's right. And that's what you're seeing with these pieces, the Ypsilon choke, the Berning, which most engineers still can't explain. They can't explain what he's doing. Nobody even wants to attempt to copy that. He's licensed it to LTA, but yeah, nobody can do that. And then Steve's stuff is notorious for having that quality under the hood. But now he's got a very attractive, I've always liked what he's done with the highlighted white and the engraving.
And by the way, the point I would make about this is that is engraved and backfilled with epoxy.
Backfilled,
That's forever. Okay?
Yeah, that's what's cool. Yeah, you don't have to worry about this. It's very attractive and it catches the light. Depending on if I turn on the light.
We wanted it to be a little more subtle, you know. We're trying not to make it too overt, but at the same time, the build quality is fantastic on these things.
Yeah,
you can see
it's
that.
beautiful.
And if you get underneath the hood, as we were talking about, using big Dohmann cast silver capacitors as an example is something under the hood that really does underscore there was no cost, no object in this. There's nothing in it gratuitous, but it's everything in there that makes it sound the way it does. And it's a fabulous passive with amazing drive capability. That's what it is. That's what makes it different.
And his other project that you have here, he doesn't really do them anyway. It was so costly to make, was his power distributor.
Right.
And you're lucky enough to have one of them.
Well, I have the only one that's been painted with a beautiful black finish that was kind of over the top.
Right.
The power distributor really started off with me saying to Steve many years ago, I'd seen other people have these devices that you would plug into one of the outlets that was kind of a filter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that those are kind of a filter in the sense that each one of those has a capacitor in it, but they're inexpensive capacitors. And so taking the trip to do that, often the balance of properties doesn't really justify doing it. So we went from that to saying, well, what if we built our own? And it led us to the Nexus. And the Nexus does have, once again, cast Dohmann silver inside of it. But when you look at this, you can kind of see from the point, these are Furatech's top-of-the-line duplex, top of the line, with the carbon fiber top, with the aluminum plinth, with the NCF. Each one of these are the NCFs inside, and they also have still points inside, so these things move. Plus it's carbon fiber and tank wood. And we've made it to be a grounding platform as well.
Yeah,
so
with
if you see these
copper
cables,
terminals,
yeah, so if you see these cables, they're all silver incline made cables. They go back to the loudspeaker, which has a third binding post. The Tidals have a third post just for
grounding.
So we've allowed that to work in the sense that the whole system is star grounded. Now, we talked about this in your other video, but for the people that didn't see that, let me just show you one other thing.
Yeah, I want to show this.
Make that real apparent. So to make that real apparent, all the cables that are coming from the individual components are star grounded into that box on the back side. And then we take one from that and we run it outside into our ground situation.
Gotcha.
So what's out there are copper pipes in the ground that really allow us to do that. But the system runs on a single cable.
Mm-hmm.
So this thought that, oh, you'll limit dynamics, oh, you won't get this or that because you've got to have multiple connections to the wall, it's really nonsense at the end of the day.
Right. If you got the right.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a 20 amp socket, and as you can see, this is OIE days aluminum plinth, and same kind of thing. That was the best for here. Gotcha. So we use the best in the wall. We use the Furatechs, which are the best in that unit over there.
And amplifier power-wise, we're not to drive these. It's not taking a lot of power.
No, it's 20 watts.
20 watts.
20 watts.
So yeah, it's not like you're needing 4-gauge line to power it.
No.
So yeah.
But even if we did have, big giant Class A amplifiers that draw a lot, if they're going to outdraw that 20 amp, then you need to put multiple 20 amps in.
Yeah,
or you need to go to 220. There are some amps that literally you should do that with. They tell you when you buy them. But it really is a misnomer that you can't do what we've done here because it does work.
Well, yeah, some of these amps, they're built to draw more than the outlet can take, but they still have a 15 amp.
That's right.
It's like, why you,
yeah,
again, people not thinking it through.
That's right.
Or just buying based on specs or factor, not really understanding. I'm paying for what,
System symbiosis is almost everything in our hobby because I see so often people buy based on the ratings of an individual product. And then when they put those together, they don't understand why it doesn't work or why it doesn't sound the way they thought it would.
Right.
But the bottom line, Jason, is always the same. Your first component is this room.
Mm-hmm.
Your second component is grounding and isolation. And I mean isolation like we're talking about here and here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't done your job with grounding and isolation first and have a room that works, you're pretty much lost to begin with. After that, if the amp-speaker interface is not linear, it doesn't matter what you do here.
Right.
It doesn't matter what
it's going to corrupt it, yeah.
Exactly. Right. You got to get that first. So those are the basic building blocks. The other thing I would point out is the Lyra connoisseur.
Yeah, this is very rare.
Yeah, it is. It's very rare. And
I've never seen one other than your place, I think.
Yeah, probably not. What it comes down to is this, Jason. That unit was originally designed as a 4.2 SE, probably 25 or 23, something like that, years ago.
Wow.
And since then, Jonathan Carr, who is the designer of, as an example, this Lyra Atlas cartridge, right? Jonathan Carr.
That's a great cartridge.
Oh, great cartridge, yeah. He was here along with Stieg, who owns the company, And they literally have been upgrading this over the years. This is the final iteration, or perhaps one of the final iterations of it. It's the 4.3. And I haven't found a phono stage that I prefer to this cost no object yet.
Still, yeah.
So, like some of the things that were done by the great John Curl as well, they stand the test of time.
The Vendetta research.
Exactly,
going,
as an example. I mean,
I was
still,
lucky enough to see somebody
you know
that owns those.
You
So
know what I mean.
seeing this and the Vendetta research in the last few months.
Exactly.
A lot of people get impressed by fancy gear on channel. But of the last 6 months or so, of all the crazy stuff I've shown, this and the Vendetta research are probably two of the most rare things I've featured on my channel. Most people don't even know that.
And they've stood the test of time.
That's right.
Because it wouldn't matter if there was a better phono stage, I'd have it. I mean, I don't want to brag about it, but it's just true. I'm not constrained.
Yeah.
If it was, I would. And there isn't one better. This is the best one from my point of view. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I know last time you were here, we did talk about it just a little bit, which had to do with the Sonorous audio.
Yeah, this intrigued me.
System,
and it's still on my list, and
Yeah.
I have to try this at some point.
Yeah.
Because, give a brief rundown of what it looks like a traditional sub, and I guess in many respects it's a JL audio.
It is a JL audio sub, but we're using it in a non-traditional way. Sonorous Audio is run by a great engineer. His name is Arian Jensen. And Arian literally has lots of patents. It's a fabulous engineer. And what he did was to take advantage of something that's well known. If you start studying about the proximity woofer, you'll find it exists. I mean, it's out there. You read it in engineering terms. So he uses this as a pump, an air pump, not as a subwoofer, an air pump. So if we take this door,
Pressurize the room.
Exactly. This big heavy door, which is sealed at the bottom. When I seal it, you can almost hear it seal.
Right.
What? All right, now this
Yeah.
is it. Okay, so
That definitely you could feel
you
the
can
air.
that. It's
Yeah.
sealed. Now you have an environment, because this is sealed behind you. You have an environment where we don't have any disturbances coming in air-wise. So this air pump is connected to this device here, which is the Sonorous Audio controller. And if you get a good look at it, you'll see it has things on there that talk about phase, it talks about shelf, that kind of thing, level. And what he does is he will come in the room and he'll start measuring with his air pressure device.
Really?
Anywhere in this area, which kind of looks like a microphone.
Okay.
But it's really an air pressure device. And what he's looking for is a place where he can literally make up for what's lost to the room. As an example, the reason this speaker's that way, laying back, is time alignment. So that the tweeter, literally, so this is part of the time alignment. Why it's leaning back the way it is.
Right.
So what he's doing is saying that the air that is lost to the room, the air pressure that's lost to the room, that velocity is, at this point, measurable. So he knows if you were in an anechoic environment where you had none of the room disturbances, what would the pressure be here?
Okay.
He's replacing it and using that as the air pump to do so.
Interesting.
So it is the air velocity lost from the loudspeaker to the final listening position that he's replacing. That's what that does.
The air pressure is getting lost in the travel.
Correct. Because the room.
Of the room.
Because the room. It's
Right.
only because
Okay.
the room. In other words, if we measured right here, the way they'll do, like typically speaker measurements are made at 2.83 feet or 1 meter, right?
Right.
And if you were right here and you're measuring these things, you get a certain kind of air pressure. You'd find that the room starts to change that, as you can imagine.
Right, of course,
That's why I
of
say
course,
room's
yeah.
the number one component.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to that listening position, that preferred listening position, you have lost significant velocity. He's replacing it. What it does is it allows the sound stage to open up. It allows the low-level cues that really are things that populate a sound stage to be more apparent. It allows you to literally feel as though you were back in that recording venue. It gives you that feeling that you're there. It's hard to describe these things in words, but they're easy to listen to, which you and I will get to, especially tonight, because we'll wait till we have the best AC late in the evening and we'll start doing that. But that's what that does. It's an air velocity replacement system. And it does require him to set it up, and it has to be set up for every amp and every speaker over and over and over.
Yeah, it's not a high volume product to be sold.
It's not. No.
Because we're talking about how much would it cost to have him come out and install something like this?
Round numbers about 10,000.
About 10,000. Okay.
About 10,000 plus expenses.
Right.
10,000. And that would include the woofer, because we're not talking about, you don't need anything that's
Right.
too big. One of the things is a proximity woofer can't be much bigger than that. Anything bigger than that, it won't work.
Yeah,
It literally
because you
has
need to
be
have
seen.
the small control
Correct.
to allow for just the minor
Correct.
amounts.
It has to be.
Because it's not going to probably be pushing a lot.
No,
but, yeah.
no. But if you have a room that literally doesn't, if you have a room that he needs two of them in, because there are sometimes you do need two.
Okay, big
There are
family
some-
room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are rooms that can do that. But it's nothing that isn't well known to people who have studied this, right? If you're a
Right.
speaker designer, you probably know
No,
what
the
proximity
effect
woofer
of
is.
that.
And it really reminds me of one of my favorite adages. There's only two kinds of new. New to you, which almost everything is, right?
Yeah.
And new to the world's rare.
Yeah.
This is just new to me and new to almost everyone I've introduced it to.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but people understand how pressure can affect your hearing. I mean, just when I come back from shows, come back off the airplane, if I don't clear my nose totally and I go listen to my system,
Right.
guess what happens?
Right.
The different pressure
That's right.
will impact how you, or if you're congested.
That's
so
right.
this is not the exact analogy here, but we're talking about pressure impacting the sound.
That's correct.
And so it's not that far-fetched. It's just something that I've never encountered anybody attempt to try to
Right.
do this.
I haven't
And
either.
so the fact that he has to do it makes total sense, because this would be a nightmare for somebody to have to
It
do
would be.
themselves.
But everyone probably has seen a picture sometime in their life of an anechoic environment.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably saw what looked like a microphone somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Right? Does that ring
Yeah.
a bell with you, Jason?
Yeah.
So you're getting an idea that that's what they're measuring, all right? To make
Okay.
sure they don't lose the velocity to the room, hence an anechoic environment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That makes sense?
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks. Well, let's go take a look real quick at
Okay,
your
yeah, you wanna
tubes,
see the
because
tube. Yeah, I'll show you the tube room.
if you have needs on any of this gear, obviously call Rick. But and he hosts a lot of people to his house.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can come and join what I'm doing today, but also tubes. He's an aficionado on tubes, like I've never seen.
Well, all of my equipment that I sell with vacuum tubes comes with the best new old stock tubes extents. If you come down here as an example, you'll get some idea of the ones that are in here, but they're all tubes that are really, really old, like 6SN7s. They happen to be the Sylvania Ws as an example. You know, we're looking at the ECC 801Ss on the Siemens as an example. The best 12 ATs I've ever heard are the Sifties that were made in 1960 in France. If we talk about some of the tubes, they're really, really old. I mean, you can look at this one as an example, and you can see it's Joint Army name, except the January 1945,
Wow.
being a 6SN7 VT231. So, you know, yeah, I have to really invest in tubes. I have to invest in a lot of things to make sure that the clients never have to wait. But the best vacuum tubes, 845s ever made, were made by Elrod today. So even if you had RCAs or Uniteds from the past, and which are ridiculously expensive these days to get a pair that's any good, right? They're still inferior to what's being made today brand new.
Is that right?
Yes, they are, because I have both. The best 845 ever made is made by Elrod today.
So yeah, Rick is another good guy to call just for his experience in tubes.
Talk to him about it.
Yeah.
And another example would be this. If you're talking about a 6V6, I don't think there's a better one ever made than the Pope. The Pope 6V6, best one ever made. So that's the kind of thing. Every week I'm buying tubes. Every week I'm searching for tubes. I have all kinds of different things I do to search for tubes. You know?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day,
Hello.
I'm not a tube lover.
Yeah.
Despite all this, I really don't like tubes. I don't want tubes. Tubes are a pain in the ass. I got to be really honest about it. Tubes are a pain in the ass. However, it's the perfect linear amplifying device, and the way we're using it, it's the only thing that'll work.
Gotcha.
Nothing else. If I could do it with solid state, believe me, I would. Because when I say tubes are a pain in the ass, of course they are. Everybody
Right.
knows that.
Yeah,
Let's be
everybody
honest,
knows.
right? They're a pain in the ass.
But we're not talking about a ton of tubes creating a ton of heat
No.
and a lot of tubes that you have to replace.
No.
And again, this
We
will
run
get
it very conservative.
Yeah, exactly. And this is powered, which we're also going to visit while I'm out here, the $1 million Acapella
that's right.
Sphaerons.
In fact, he's got two pairs of them.
Yes, exactly. So more to come, guys. Hope you enjoyed this revisit with Rick, and thanks again, Rick.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.